Welcome back to our conversation, Cybersecurity Analytics and Big Data, sponsored by Cloudera on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Eddie Garcia, the Chief Security Architect in the Office of the CTO at Cloudera. Now, Eddie, before break, we were talking a lot about some open source. We were talking about Hadoop, some products you guys are building on top of Hadoop. Talk a little bit about open source more generally. When it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to data analytics, it seems to be the way to go, just based on the way you described what Hadoop, for instance, as one example, could do.
Yeah, so open source is going to be a game changer for both the public sector. We're starting to see it already on the commercial side. A lot of enterprises, organizations building their platforms on open source. Hadoop being a big component of that, and being able to run analytics, not just for security, of course, to improve different business use cases in healthcare and medicine, and there's a lot of different areas where we're starting to see huge exponential growth with big data and open source. Now, one of the things that I think in the federal and public sector, they're going to be able to move out of some of the existing legacy technologies and be able to excel in productivity levels, and also see some new areas of focus within their organization that they weren't able to see before without big data.
I think that's the key here is helping organizations, again, federal, non-federal, make better decisions through big data. Is open source getting a lot more popular because of its ease of use, because it's quote-unquote cheap, free, or is it just, that's just, again, part of the evolution that when you're proprietary software and you're trying to plug in, bring data from one proprietary to another proprietary, that is just difficult?
Well, it allows a lot of people to play with the technology. So a lot of people will download, play with the technology, and be able to get familiarized with it. So that's one of the kind of entry points, that it's very easy to enter into the technology. But then on the other side, you have large organizations that have been using big data, these open source technologies for years, that have already made it industry proof. So you have organizations, it's very easy to come in, and it's very easy to go into the enterprise. And you have the options with commercial distributions like Cloudera. If you want to have the commercial support, then you can have the commercial version of that software.
And I think the other piece you mentioned was the legacy systems. Agencies are dying to get off legacy systems. I know Federal CIO Tony Scott talked about the amount of money agencies are spending from an IT perspective is pushing toward 80% again. So if they could do something that's cheap or free, that's a very attractive thing for them.
Yeah, open source, even with the subscriptions, is significantly lower in cost than proprietary legacy systems that we've been seeing in the past. And not only that, these systems are really built from the ground up to run like in virtualized environments and in cloud. So those are the other areas within IT organizations where it can make a significant cost reductions, is not only just on the software side, but also on the hardware side and using virtualization. So both of those combined together.
One of the other pieces of this, and you kind of talk about it when you bring up Hadoop, is the idea of access control and dynamic data access control. What are some of the things that agencies really should consider as they're moving to this open source platform, but they still need to know who has access and when?
Yeah, so as we talked about in Sprint, one of the few of the focuses were authentication, also the least privilege, being able to understand and tune down the privileges based off of needs. So the least privilege is one of the basic tenets in security, and what we are able to do now with recent technology that we've just added to Hadoop, the record service, is get more granular. So if you don't need access to a particular row in a piece of data, that you can do that, or if only particular rows, if you're in a certain region and you only need to look at data for your region, so we can reduce access to just those rows. So you don't need to look at the rows for another region. So being able to have more granular authorization and being able to consistently monitor it.
Just to bring kind of the whole conversation back to the beginning a little bit, when we talk about data security and cybersecurity, really this role-based authentication, authorization, access control is the end result, I think, where a lot of agencies are going. It sounds like the record service, as you described it, is a big giant step toward that direction. And is that enabled because of Hadoop, because it's open source? I mean, give me a sense of how this works.
Well, a lot of the open source, how it's built is based off of customer use cases. So customers are driving what are the requirements within the software, and contributors are building these components, and record service is directly a product of that. And it's going to give the capabilities where you actually tie together the data security with cybersecurity, because you can lock down the authorization and access, but then you can also watch it and dynamically modify it based off of user behavior.
And that goes back to our behavior analytics conversation, the real-time conversation. And this is all connected, which obviously leads us to, okay, so what should agencies do next? Where should they go from here? No agency is at 0, but no agency is also at 100. So most, from your perspective, where are they, and then where can they go next? What's the logical step?
So the next logical step is really to start to understand all the capabilities within the Hadoop ecosystem. It's a very large ecosystem. It's you have components like Spark, like HBase, like HDFS, and really the knowledge education part of it is understanding first the core platform, what it can do, and then look at some of the use cases. We have great use cases on our website, on cybersecurity, on healthcare, on financial sector. So we have very quite a few use cases, and what we're starting to build out as well on the security side of PCI, cybersecurity, specific platforms that more cookie cutter that organizations can start to build off of experience of another organization already went through it.
Is there one big pothole that you see agencies fall into more often than not?
So I think the biggest problem is just the data sprawl. Being able to, just not having control over all the data. So data governance is really important.
And I know that's something that the Data Act, we could go, again, a whole nother show about that, is trying to help out, at least with financial world and procurement world. And of course, there's a lot of push from the Office of Management and Budget, or you mentioned the Cyber Sprint, to ensure that you know what your critical data is and how you're protecting it. All good advice, all good things. Unfortunately, Eddie, we are out of time. You've been listening to the Cybersecurity Analytics and Big Data, sponsored by Cloudera on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm Jason Miller, and my guest today was Eddie Garcia, the Chief Security Architect in the Office of the CTO at Cloudera. Eddie, thank you so much.
Thank you.